Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Duke, joined at the desk by Bofta Yimam.
Good to be here, back again.
Yeah, thanks for coming back.
It's a ladies hour, huh?
I love the ladies hour. All right, here is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at the White House press briefing yesterday, reading a statement from President Trump on the Iran war.
I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
Leavitt also addressed whether President Trump was trying his best to avoid conflict and pursue diplomacy instead.
Let's take a look.
I think the president has made it clear he always wants to pursue diplomacy, but believe me, the president is unafraid to use strength if necessary. And Iran and the entire world should know that the United States military is the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world.
For a deal to be reached, Leavitt said Iran must agree to no more uranium enrichment, that it can't be able to build a nuclear bomb. Here's Democrat Senator Tammy Duckworth yesterday cautioning the U.S.'s approach toward a conflict with Iran.
We have to make sure that we are working towards resolving the situation. I don't think any Americans want more U.S. troops to be sent into yet another 10, 20 years of war in the Middle East.
An IDF spokesman said this morning that Israel was currently striking military infrastructure in central and western Iran. European countries will hold talks with Iranian representatives later today. The New York Times reports Europe is expected to urge Iran to return to the negotiating table.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday that Israel didn't need the U.S.'s help to achieve its goals in Iran. He did say that the U.S. could join them if it wants. As for the regime change, Netanyahu said that was up to the Iranian people and that this was not a formal goal of Israel's.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei wrote on X yesterday, "I would like to tell our dear nation that if the enemy senses that you fear them, they won't let go of you. Continue the very behavior that you have had up to this day. Continue this behavior with strength." So a lot of new developments, obviously. Trump announcing that he would decide whether or not to strike Iran within 2 weeks. Caroline Leavitt also at that press briefing yesterday indicated that the intelligence indicating that Iran was weeks or days away from obtaining a nuclear weapon came from Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. Obviously, that was different than what we heard in March back from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Trump also signaling that he's willing to return to negotiations with Iran, which I think overall is good news. I don't know where you stand on this, but on the sort of populist conservative side of things, we're very concerned about the possibility of an American strike leading to a potential regime change war. So these developments, I think, are generally pretty positive.
Well, look, I think that it's interesting that President Trump ran on being a peacemaker, a unifier, someone who was not going to get into a foreign entanglement, so to speak. And then here we are right now. And it's clear that we only have a few options, right? Iran and Israel could go at this themselves. The U.S. could get involved with no known consequences. We don't know what's going to happen if the U.S. starts to get involved, as we have seen with wars in the past. Or the U.S. could, just take a back seat completely. So I don't know if we have a ton of options here. And I think that it's interesting that President Trump has given maybe a yellow light, maybe not a full green light, but done the dance with Israel. And they have seen that it's not a clear no. And now we're in this position. And so I think that he's also surrounded himself, President Trump, with a lot of loyalists, not necessarily those who are extremely experienced in foreign policy. So I just think that's we're at a very tricky moment right now, and what happens in the days and weeks ahead, we have to tread really carefully. And we have learned from the past, hopefully, that we need to have serious debates about this before we go full force.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people are calling for Congress to have to go through the War Powers Act for Trump to be even able to do that strike with the bunker buster bomb that Israel has apparently been asking for. Netanyahu's comments I thought were also interesting, where he said that Israel doesn't need the U.S. to get involved to help them. That's a little bit different than what he's been saying in prior weeks. I wonder if maybe he got a little bit of a talking to, like, hey, don't rope the U.S. into this until we've made a decision, until we might be ready to get involved, if at all. There's also been some, I think, conflicting arguments from the pro-war side, from senators like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, and then people outside of the administration, which is the Iranian regime has apparently been weakened significantly from Israel's attacks, which I think is possibly true, right? They've taken out a lot of military leaders. But if the Iranian regime is so weak that it could be close to toppling with just a couple of weeks of strikes, then how are we to accept that they are such a threat to the United States? And how are we to accept that if the U.S. does go in and bomb this nuclear facility and get militarily involved, that it won't ultimately lead to a very chaotic regime change situation? I think these discussions are obviously happening in the White House. You have people like J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard who are more on the anti-interventionist or at least interventionist skeptic wing of foreign policy. And then you've got people who are a little bit more hawkish, like Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. So I imagine that there actually is probably a very tense discussion happening in the White House. We saw that kind of play out in the leaked the leaked Signal chat, right, when they were talking about war plans against the Houthis.
Yeah, and I think that Trump, if he's listening to the young voters and his base, his core base, I think that if he listened to them, I don't think he would be in this position. I think that many really liked his stance that he was kind of the antidote of not getting involved.
Right.
And I think that he ran on that, and that resonated with a lot of his base. So I think it's, again, interesting that we're in this position right now. Could he come to, and I should have mentioned this before, a diplomatic resolution with Iran? Possibly. But I think your point is a good point, too. You know, what are the chances? Because there are other countries that have nuclear weapons. And what are the chances? Sometimes, you know, countries have that just as the defensive of, hey, we've got this, so don't do anything to us, so to speak. And so they don't really, we know that they have it. We don't think people are going to use it. Countries are going to use it. But I think it's interesting that we're taking Iran, and like you said, already there's been a lot of, so to speak, success on the part of Israel, if you want to call it that, going after some of their military leadership. And here we are thinking that they might actually, if they have even a nuclear weapon, may use it in the future. I don't know. I think it's a stretch.
Yeah, it's definitely based on a lot of quote-unquote intelligence that, frankly, the American people are very skeptical of after the WMD situation with Iraq and Afghanistan. The other part of this is that back on April 15th, apparently, there's new reporting. Israel wanted to strike then, and Trump told them flat out, no, you have to wait. So when you fast forward to the first strike that Israel launched against Iran, Trump was sort of signaling publicly that he didn't know anything about it or didn't have anything to do with it. And then when it actually happened, indicated that it was some kind of subterfuge to have the Iranians caught off guard and to knock them off balance. I think that April 15th reporting does indicate that he has been, to at least some degree, directing Israel's military response and what they are and are not allowed to do, considering they are receiving a lot of American funding and a lot of American weaponry.
That's right, and some of that was actually derailed from Ukraine and apparently headed to Israel just in the past several months. All right, well, we'll have more on that. But the LA Dodgers, we want to get to this story just coming up. Icing out ice? Or is it ice? We'll explain it next.